Thank you everyone for joining this virtual event. I hope everyone is enjoying the 2021 and the exciting new start of the semester. As one of the popular requests from our members, today's event is on PhD journey from the perspectives of candidates in different stages of the program. We have 5 panels who will share their experience, tips, and tricks they learned throughout the PhD journey, especially how they have survived and triumphed this past year. Each panel will have 10 minutes to share their story, followed by about 5 minutes of Q&A. And at the end of the all 5 presentation or talks, we will have additional 15 to 20 minutes for the Q&A. So don't worry if you missed the timing to ask questions. We will start with Baha in marketing, who's busy with job talks and interviews these days. Baha, how's the job market and how have you been preparing for it?
Well, job market is quite complicated. The years that we're living are complicated themselves, so that comes with complication in the job market too. So let me talk about what happens in general terms, and hoping that things will go back to this norm, at least in marketing field. So what happens is that every year in summer, there's a big event. We call it Summer AMA. AMA stands for American Marketing Association. And in this conference, all the schools who are hiring, which obviously it's not all of the schools every year that are hiring, depending on their needs, whether there's somebody retiring or changing schools, etc., they would be on the market, ready to talk to candidates in that conference. And imagine like 100 schools, let's say, talking to candidates that conference, 3 days long, back-to-back interviews. So right now, this is not happening. In summer, they postponed it to winter, and about a month ago, they said that, oh, winter is not happening either. So everybody's hiring in their own pace. So what's different now is you don't know who will be hiring in the future, and there are exploding offers that they're going to give you that you have like a week to respond. So you don't know what you're missing out. You start talking to schools, and then maybe some schools have already completed their, hiring process. So there's an information asymmetry, and I think there would be some papers about this year's job market for sure. But aside from all this, it's going well. I'm not applying to a whole lot of schools because I have a narrow scope, really. So, but yeah, I think an average candidate would apply to like anywhere from like 60 to 100 schools. I so far applied to only 10 schools. But again, this also is because not a lot of schools are hiring. So what else? I actually just wrote down some notes. I don't have a presentation, just like a true senior PhD student. And you will see that, just think of me as like this old man and take whatever works for you seriously and leave everything else. And I'm in my 6th year, and not a lot of people have 6-year programs. So I'm pretty old for, a first year. I don't remember what happened in the first year really. But and if there are any questions, like, feel free to interrupt me. I don't really mind answering questions as we go.
While you're getting to your notes, reverting back to the previous question about how are you targeting or how are you customizing each of those the packages to tailoring it to each of the schools. Can you talk a little bit more on that?
Yeah, great question. So, and again, this, everybody has their own style, so they would do things differently maybe, but how I do it is making sure that I know the department, at least at the surface level. What I mean by that is, do they have like a dedicated marketing department, or do they have an economics and business department together where some marketing people are in that. So this kind of helps me realize like how specialized they are or how general they are. And I would highlight the features that I have that would satisfy, either of these things. So I would position myself accordingly. Like, for example, quite a bit of schools are marketing and supply chain departments. They have marketing and supply chain departments. So I would highlight my studies that kind of touch upon supply chain. And it doesn't have to be like this traditional supply chain paper, but like I have a paper in sharing economy where it's a triadic business model with, service providers and platforms and customers, but all of these are connected to each other. So this is a supply chain itself, and it's a value chain. So I would market this and package this in a way that would cater to, any supply chain needs. And if it's like a little bit too far of a shot, I wouldn't even apply there because I wouldn't feel happy there. That's another end of the spectrum. So let me see. Let me try to share my screen. Okay. All right. So I just like wrote down a few notes here. And some of them are more concrete than others. Some of them are more tangible than others. First one is a tangible one, of course. Even if you're in your first year, and especially if you're in your first year, I think it's important that you look at the candidates right now and look at their resumes. What do they have in their resumes? What kind of research are they doing? This will give you an idea. If you see something in 3 or 4 candidates, then you will know that, okay, this must be a hot topic right now. And it is for you to decide, is this a fad? Is this going to go away, or is this something that's going to stick around for a little bit? And am I interested in this? So I think this is quite important. Right now in marketing, marketing analytics and digital marketing is like, they're booming. Everybody wants that. And luckily I'm in digital marketing myself. My dissertation is in that. So that works out. And I've been teaching marketing research for like, I taught 8 sections of it. And marketing analytics is just a little bit more quant version of marketing research. So it works out. But if you don't want to risk it, then look at the candidates right now. That will be helpful. Think about what kind of research stream that you want to be known in. If possible, try to tie your papers together somehow. That would be helpful. What else do I have here? Yeah, I think I talked about the third point. Be mindful of what schools need and how you can meet that and highlight your profile accordingly. And I think it's also important to build a circle of friends, PhD friends, and share useful insights and updates with one another. PhD fellows is a great example of that we share updates with each other. I don't know why my screen got disappeared, but anyway, I can still talk. So a few more informal tips I would give. Network, even if you don't think it helps you in the immediate term. And be nice to people. Don't be an ass. Don't try to be this know-it-all that just knows better than everybody else. Just, be humble about things, even if you are an expert in the field, which none of us really are. So yeah, networking is important. For example, I'll just give you an example of tomorrow's interview. The school that's hiring and gave me an interview, they received about 128 applications. So they had 128 applicants, which is extremely high. When I decided to apply for them, I was kind of trying to decide which paper do I want to present. Do I want to present a more done paper that is already in the review process, or do I want to present something that I'm really excited about, but then I'm still awaiting data? Which one? So as I was trying to decide that, they closed their ad. So so that the link was unavailable. So what would happen right now is I would just leave that and like go on about my life. But I knew a professor in this university, and then I reached out to that professor saying that, hi, the link seems to be either broken or maybe you guys are not hiring. And then I hear that, no, we are hiring, but we kept the application intake process very short. And then after I talked with that professor, they opened that position for a day only for me to just send my application in. Nobody really needs to do that. It's on me I didn't apply on time. I mean, I had my reasons, but I didn't apply on time. But with this network, I was able to like reach out to this person. They opened the, application portal for me temporarily for one day, and I put in my application, and I'm one of the 18 people they're going to talk with. So none of this would have happened if I didn't network. So, I mean, this is just an example of past few weeks, and another reason that you should be nice to people because academia is small. Don't be an ass. Just a couple of last points here. Don't try to be great at everything. You cannot be. Technically, it's not possible, I think. Try to be good at something specific that ideally you are interested in, and forget about this passion, whatever bullshit people tell you about. I think passion is overrated and discipline is underrated. So you will be excited about something the more you work in it. This passion is like nobody's passionate about supply chain. Like nobody is born with a passion with supply chain. You work on this, you see something you're interested in, and then you keep on working, you publish, and then you're known in this, and everything is great after that. So don't wait for this like fairy to like whisper in your ear, okay, you are meant to do this kind of research. Just pick something, go with it, and realize that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So pace yourself, take care of your body. This is the best way to avoid burnout. There's research on this. And drink lots of water, and also drink with your friends. I think that's my 2 cents.
Great, thank you. I think I'm looking forward to drink with your friends part. Um, can you talk a little bit more on
And
how
I
you
meant
met?
alcoholic drinks.
Yes, yes, and I mean that too. And can you talk a little bit more on how you met that professor and how you maintained the network?
That's a great question. So networking I think it's a very delicate topic, and some people are naturally inclined to do that, and some people are not. I would urge you to just try to get out of your shell and just try to talk to people, and not like directly asking them, hey, you work in this area, I work in this area, let's work together. Like not like aggressive like that. Just ask about their day, just talk to them. They're real people just like you. I think what we are kind of mistaking sometimes with networking is like, oh, it has to be tied to work like immediately. That person has to help me right now. It's the opposite of that. So how I met this professor is, I think we were at a conference in Greece, a great place to be in a conference. And we were just sitting in the same table, just discussing the type of research that I was doing and he was doing. So very, very casual, informal talk. And every time I would see that person, I would just reach out and ask how they are and how things are going. That's it. Nothing really that complicated, but don't be that like aggressive type that tries to go to the biggest shot in the room and like be around them to say hi. That person will not remember you, first of all. You want to network with people that are not like that big shot. You want to network with people that is right below that. because those people are, they have the motivation to publish. They have the motivation to like do well, to be a big shot maybe. So those people are going to be the productive people. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that would be my suggestion on this. And I might be wrong. This is just the way I see it.
That's a great suggestion, Baha. I have one question for you. As after a marathon of 6 years, how could you continuously maintain your motivation, get up to work on the stuff without like such a long-term feedback cycle? Like, have you ever did you force yourself to get into a set schedule or a set goal every day? How do you do that?
I ask myself that every day, especially in these times, when nothing is really structured. It's hard to really do that. But like, there are natural deadlines, right? I'm talking to a school tomorrow, so I have to do certain things. And then if I apply to another school, maybe I would further my progress. I have a paper that's under review that we are in a second round with a top journal. So many responsibilities are there. I think if you have a friend group that actually, urges you to move forward, that is good. The support mechanism. And this is, again, very personal. Like, if it works for you to note down what you need to do that day and stick with that, that is great. I'm not really like that, but I work with natural deadlines. That's how I function best.
So more like event based.
Exactly, and they exist around. Like, it's not like you'll struggle to find these. So if you have you have an advisor, you can talk with them as well. And if you were working on a project, you would set a timeline about, okay, when I would send out something to this journal, what would be the timeline looking like? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I just
Great.
heard from the marketing center. One last question about the follow-up question. The marketing center, usually when we still work in office, like in backend center, you have strict even like check-in, check-out system. Like, do you guys still do that?
No, we don't do that anymore. But I mean, yeah, like that, like the reason that we have a 6-year program, the reason that we were going there every day from 9:30 to 6 p.m., that is all within the structure that we, accepted to be a part of. Right now, it's more in our hands. I work from home. I teach at the same time. And that's another thing I will say. You'll start teaching soon enough. So you need to know how to balance teaching with research and not really ignore teaching completely, because those people really look up to you, those students, and you owe it to them to provide quality teaching. But if you teach something enough, you don't really need a lot of preparation. You can really still care about them and then continue your research stream.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love this enthusiasm. While I really like to continue this discussion, I think in the interest of time, we'll have to move to the next presenter. Will you be ready? So Will, he is in his second year in CDIN department, CDIN department. He survived his first year of the PhD program. Will you be able to present? Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. And thank you all for attending this presentation and watching this video. So this is mainly focused on first and second year students. I think Baha gave us a good perspective of what it looks like as a good overall process. My experience is talking mainly on those early experiences in our PhD program and what to look forward as we progress. So as you set up early on, I think you're, depending on what your goal is to be once you graduate and get your PhD is, at least for me and most of the students in here, you're looking at academic publications as your main goal in order for it to help you as you progress towards, getting tenure or whatever specific goal you have. In terms of short-term objectives, which is prior to graduating with PhD, you're looking at your dissertation, and the focus of this into your first 2 years obviously could be your comprehensive exam, but the main one that I get told all the time and emphasize when I talk to my advisors is learning, whether it's through classes, whether it's attending conferences. This is the stage of your program that you really need to pick up different skills or areas that you're interested in. You learn about it. The second one, which I think it's important, is building that academic endurance. Some of you or most of you transfer from either going from school, it might not be much of a challenge, but if you're coming from working to industry, coming back to school is difficult. Reading all the papers, the type of language that they use, it is difficult. So making that transition, it's important that you do it within your first 2 years, building that endurance. And if you do come from industry, one of the main things is just keeping those connections, keep in touch on the industry, seeing what practice is doing. I think that will help you out not only on building your research ideas, but really keep in mind that what you do is not only a contribution to the academic side, but you need to contribute to practice as well. Focuses on the first 2 years, again, is skills and methods, which takes us to what classes you should take. And as I'm told my advisors, yes, sure, you need to do it. Look at what your required classes are and get those completed. And take classes that are challenging to you, classes that you're not familiar with the content. And you might not get an A, but you learn a lot. What you shouldn't do is take classes that you are familiar with the content, they're not required. And, if you go through the class and I got it, I knew it all. So you were pretty much wasting your time. So you want to go ahead and focus on the classes that you take, not necessarily doing it for the grade, but doing it for the knowledge that you think you get. So as a rule, if you look at classes, registering for classes outside of your required classes, look at the syllabus, look at the content, and really make a decision whether it's worth spending that time and what you're going to get out of that class. Since my focus is on first and second year students, I want to share with you some of the items that you really need to have in line to be able to prepare perhaps for a comprehensive exam. So storing files, you definitely want to have it on the cloud on either on OneDrive, which is free for GSU students up to 1 terabyte, I believe, or Dropbox. That's easy to say if you store it locally and you lose your laptop or it gets stolen. You really want to have a backup, and all your important files need to be backed up on the cloud. Second thing, for citations, as you keep writing papers, as you get more organized, really leverage Endnote and Mendeley. If you don't know how to use it, there are plenty of resources, and we can even put together a session because it does pay off the work that you do in your first 2 years to learn those tools. Class notes, while pen and paper work just fine, perhaps you want to consider using OneNote or Evernote to keep more organized, to index your information. As you can see on the screenshot, this will become helpful when you're trying to get all your thoughts organized and even reference it back in the past. So as you're writing a paper and you recall a specific class, or you discuss a specific topic, it's so much easier if you have it stored digitally that you can index and reference. Task management, there's plenty of good tools out there. Microsoft To Do, which again, it's free. And Monday, just to keep you organized, to see your deadlines and help you manage your time and time management. And to collaborate with other teammates, Microsoft Teams is available again for GSU students. Google Drive and Docs, again, you want to go ahead and keep collaboration simple and streamline that process. As a student, you do get a lot of free perks, or not really pay, you already pay for them, so might as well use them. So as a graduate assistant, and even as just a student, you get the full suite of Adobe products, Microsoft Suite, EndNote, Grammarly, LinkedIn Learning, and NVivo, SAS data, and Cisco VPN. So if you go to a link, just download those things. It might not seem useful right now, But as you, again, as you're writing more, as you're doing more analysis, you do have all those different softwares available that you can use. If you're in your first and second year and you're perhaps taking a class where they're using a specific programming language that you might not be familiar with, statistical language or a program, the GSU library offers plenty of workshops, and they have really good intro code. So perhaps you're really good with R and Python, but your class right now manages data. If making that transition is a little bit difficult through class, there are plenty of resources on the library that they'll give you a guide, they'll show you code, you go through different exercises, and I know they keep getting new programs, and this is mainly focused on what undergrads or graduate students, but if you're just new to something and you want to learn it, this might be a good way to start. And then have them as a reference in case you have a specific code that you can't figure out. You can contact them after attending their workshop. And I found that they're very friendly. If the information that you have, it's not available through them, what I do recommend is using LinkedIn Learning. They have a lot of really good codes and programs. So when I was learning on Pandas, for example, on Python, and if you're not familiar with them, if you go through it, you go through the exercises, even as an introduction, you might not master the application itself, but there are plenty of classes out there taught by very well proficient people on the subject, and they're really good at teaching it. They have example exercises that you can download and then go through the exercise as you go to learn all these different things. And again, they're coming up with new things all the time. So as you're starting a new project or you have a question, just remember that there's plenty of resources that as a GSU student you can leverage to learn. Now, as we move forward, outside of academics is very important for even first and second year students. Time management, as I discussed, mental health is extremely important. And obviously don't burn out, take breaks. And my advisor tells me that every time we meet after a specific call, and if you're thinking about a lot of things, you're going through class and you're also working on research projects, you got to make sure you take breaks. You got to make sure you take care of yourself, learn your limits, and build that endurance. Because you'll hear it that it's only going to get more complicated as you go. And as a first year student, I remember hearing that all the time. It's like, I'm not sure if I want to be here, if it's just going to get worse. And I feel like it's bad already. But, talking with people, communicating, building that endurance, just remember that after all the bad things that people talk about and how negative things are, there's also positives to it. I mean, if you look outside of academics right now, the market might not be as good. There's people without jobs. So you being on this PhD program, you have an opportunity to contribute, not just for yourself, but for others. So keep that in mind. As a student, one of the things that I used all the time, especially before the pandemic, was all the discounts that we have. So when my family was here my first semester, I remember leveraged this discount page to take them on tours, getting tickets to games, discovering Atlanta, as well as other things. Like I got a membership from Sam's Club out of this page of all the free resources that we have as students and get really good deals. So I encourage you to leverage the fact that you are a student, save some money, and use it, because once you graduate and move into a regular job, all those perks will be gone. So keep that in mind. So as a few takeaways again for first and second year students is, take it a step at a time. You'll hear a lot of people, as I mentioned, complain about how it gets worse, and you want to be aware of it, but do not worry too much of it. Keep what's in front of you as your main priority. Keep awareness of what's going on. Create a strategy that works for you. Throughout my conversation and suggestions, things might not work out for you, and that's totally fine. You need to create a strategy that works for your schedule, works for your type of research, and it's working when you're making progress. Use your PhD network of friends for academic and mental support. There's nothing worse than getting out of class when you feel like you cannot understand anything. But the good side of it is if you turn to your colleague to the right and he's on the same page, at least that makes you feel a little better. So make sure you communicate with other students. Make sure you talk to others, help yourself, help them. because at the end of the day, you're going through this together, and it's like a one big family. And finally, and this is something that I get told all the time, is believe in yourself. You can do it. There's a reason why someone admitted you into the program, and that's super important. So in times where you feel like you need to quit or things are not working out, and you feel like it's going to get worse, just remember that someone looked at you, looked at your application, and said you have what it takes to to get a PhD and to contribute to research. So my suggestion is if you go through times where you're getting really frustrated how things are, is just look back at your application, see what you wanted to do, why you wanted to get a PhD, what were your goals, and work towards it. Take it a step at a time. And if someone thinks you have what it takes to do it, it's probably true. And yeah, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
That was a great presentation. It was a great summary, as well as I didn't know about the discount. I'm gonna use that. Look on that discount page later on. I don't know about others, but I'm still struggling with honestly, I'm still struggling with how to organize the papers and the notes that I take on those papers. Um, I still do analogly. I do like leave the marks on the paper, but have trouble if I want to search for those ones. And I noticed that you are organizing it very well. Can you share a little bit more about your typical process on taking notes on the on each of the papers?
Um, so it keeps evolving as it goes, but something that one of my advisors shared with me is just being consistent. So when you look at a really good paper, put it into Endnote, highlight, and then index it, and then remember at the top or at some point, this is what I thought it was interesting on the paper. Um, and obviously I think maybe we can put something together where you use your technology for you. So whether you're linking it to OneNote and taking notes and then linking it back, or again, purely EndNote and then going into Word. Um, that organization pays off at the end where you know exactly what you're looking for. So if you're looking for, I want to remember this paper on competition, you can just type competition, and here are all your notes where you tag, here's what they talked about competition, and so on. And again, it's still evolving. I'm sure there's
Mm.
better ways to do it, but it's really what works for each of us.
I'm barely maintaining it by I whatever I highlight or take notes, I try to make a duplicate version on a platform called Notion, and I try to make a summary and highlight the things that I want to add. But that process is separate. It's not like when I do it in one platform, it transfers to the other platform. So I was wondering if how, I'm sure a lot of us is going through similar stuff, but I wasn't happy with my process. I was wondering what others are doing.
Yeah,
Um,
what I thought about when I was putting this together is I would love to hear what others are doing, because
yes.
perhaps there's a better way to do it.
Hmm.
So maybe on a future session we can all share how we go through this process and what each of us do, and maybe a Word doc, I don't know,
I
and then
would love
maybe
to
that
hear
will
that.
help.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think it would also help me and others to figure out what best works for each of us, and then go from there.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I recently tried a relatively simple but use like more effective way is just use spreadsheet to that is more project wise. Like for a certain topic, I'm curious, select the relevant quotes and have another columns to put in my thoughts and how this can be put in which part of the paper. I use this in my comms paper for a specific project. But I guess a general literature review and reading, we still have to spend more time to maintain the software because sometimes the software is not automatic enough. So I guess for the interest of time, I will be the third year student.
Yes,
Shall I
yes.
start my part? Mm-hmm.
So we'll now, that was a very good transition. We'll proceed with Sophia, who adopted a cat past year, and she has successfully passed the comprehensive exam and landed safely on her third year in the CIS department.
Thank you, Will, for such a fantastic introduction. I wish I have heard your introduction when I was first year. So today I won't spend too much time, only prepared 2 slides to talk about from what we perceive the structured coursework stage to the unstructured, more research-based and dissertation-focused stage. So my talk would be probably just about 2 main parts. The first part is about how to prepare the comprehensive exam, and the second one is how do we address the post-coms slump. So as for the comms, I guess Danica at the beginning of the program already tell us about this. The components of comms may differ by different departments. So in CIS, we mainly have 3 parts: the written exam, the methodology, the topic part, and a week-long or 8 days long also research proposal, and as well as the final oral defense. So we have to understand first is to align the objective of the comms so that we can properly to leverage strategy to prepare for it. So there's a saying that the comms is sort of like the academic hazing ritual, that when you enter a certain discipline, but we need to adjust our mindset towards to understand this is a process help us to understand the basic research paradigm in our discipline, as well as to master the basic methodologies for a scholar. So this help us to in the first 2 years to mindfully to attend a class, to take in information and prepare for comms. Not only so your class is not only like a semester wise, but it's a career wise, career long preparation. So it was an interesting process. I guess Jeremy and I are cohorts. So I have 3 main tips for comms prep. First is you have to leverage the support system. I find myself learn best when I intake the information and communicate the information. So in the first stage, Jeremy and I set up weekly call. At the end of week, we sort of discuss what we have covered. We try to also share the notes to see. In the process, you can also learn from what others learned that you neglect, but also help you to strengthen your memory and understanding. So that really helped a lot for me. So here I want to thank you, Jeremy, for helping me going through this. And also the second point, which was Dr. Dequibin Marupin recommended, is to have mock exams. We also had a setup of 2 or 3 times of mock exam, simply just talk about pick up one topic, one area of that's very likely to be in the exam, and then close book and just type in whatever you know, what you can come up after the first round of the review. This is a good practice for you to learn to pace yourself, like to let your thoughts flow out and then flash out in a written form, instead of a more like we can only come up some phrases and not really a sentence and have a logic in a paragraph. So this way really help us to get a better sense if your discipline is going to have a similar type of the closed book written exam. As for the final point, here I put emphasis on the adequate. So take adequate time to prepare. Why is that? Because we tend to, we can go to two extremes. One is we pay little attention to it and just feel like, well, whatever, I can just go and take it without really preparing sufficiently. On the other extreme, we may prepare for it for half a year or like a couple of months, like fully put aside all your research project, fully focusing on your comms. So there may be consequences for either extreme. The first case, of course, you probably will fail. So in some departments, they may just not, although you won't likely be kicked out, but it's still not a good impression in front of your professors, which would be responsible for signing a signature to to give you a PhD. So that is not desirable. On the other extreme, since we have to rethink about the nature and objective comms exam. At the end of the day, we are not evaluated in the job market how well we did in the comms. No one cares. But this process is help you to gain the threshold of as a scholar of the basic understanding and the skills. If you put aside your research project, which is what actually matters at the end of the day, that somewhat backfires the purpose of the comms. So at the same time, I personally had to put aside my research project for a month while preparing for comms. But after the comms, still you have to remind yourself the research paper writing is the real thing. So this is only one exam. This is probably the last exam in your life. So here we have to be aware again the mindset. Your professors are not really trying to bully you, hate you, do the hazing ritual, but they are just trying to help you to along the way of become a great scholar. And also, if you get anxiety in the process, just remind yourself failing or passing the comms won't really appear on your resume 5 years later anyway. You can just try your best in this process and take what you can take. So based on statistics, like most people will pass if you put in adequate effort. Then another challenge I assume we would face is what we call the post-com. The post-com slump. The infamous post-com slump is talked about after your motivation level achieved its peak at the second year at the comms, and then after passing comms. The world is so beautiful, and then I finally got my freedom. Let me take a 2 weeks break. Let me take another 1 month break. Let me take another 2 month break, and then half year passed by. You just very hard to get back to your previous schedule and the motivational level to work towards the goal, towards your research objective, towards dissertation. It's really hard to adjust the mode. So here, it's also a tricky thing to manage. It's very important to take good break. Like if the situation allows, go for a trip, or take a whole week or 2 week, whole 2 week off the work to feel you fully get recharged and enjoy the time, enjoy the moment to catch up the things you couldn't while you were busy preparing for comms. In this way, when you are coming back, you feel ready and refreshed instead of still just lingering in back. Want to have some fun, but you may regret you didn't get time. So that is you have to cherish the moment and celebrate, take a good break. After that, you coming back, you have to, it's helpful to set up a structured schedule to help yourself to build accountability. So you have to commit yourself to do some writings, to do some research related stuff on daily basis. And although there may be some natural deadlines, but there are times that don't really, you have to create deadlines for yourself. And also using a support system to align your time with the task. And I heard a concept called Sunday meeting from a webinar, like at the end of week, to really list the things you need to do in the next week and allocate time to it, and to also map the process. So it will be very helpful for us to transition to the unstructured schedule. And finally, it's to record or keeping your daily progress, no matter it's word count or what you have accomplished. A sense of accomplishment will be very helpful for you to come back the next day feeling ready to continue whatever you were doing. So here are the two resources I think of. First is this is also free for graduate students, the National Center of Faculty. This website, they have very helpful the 14 days writing challenge and all sorts of the webinar in regarding to research, writing, faculty, career management, and in this challenging time, mental health. So it's a great place to look for resources. Their main target is for faculty members, but for us, it's also a good early start. And another one is sort of what we have been discussing in the group. Jeremy, Sarah, and I are creating such a Skype group. It's sort of just a virtual working session to help hold each other accountable. We would usually just jump in the session, mute ourselves, and start working with a tomato clock. With 15 minutes working, 10 minutes break. So whoever needs such accountability, you are also welcome to join us. So this would be my sort of the two aspects of sharing in the past year as a second year student. I'm also exploring in this journey, and I look forward to answer any questions, comments that we can discuss. Thank you. All right, let me close it.
Thank you, Sophia.
Okay.
Then I need to thank you again for during the comprehensive exam. She corrected a lot of things that I had marked wrong in the notes, and that was a good experience of sharing what we know, and by like thinking out loud or remembering out loud, it's a chance to notice your faulty points or chance to correct the others. And that was by doing that interaction, it was actually a good exercise that helped me remember more. And since it was also on accountability sessions for both sides, I think that helped with not only getting into the schedule, but also getting what I summarized, just scribing that back into my head. Those sessions really helped a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, it's mutual wise that I also mutually helped me. So this is sort of it's the benefit in PhD program in academia is in most cases you are working with each other rather than being competitors. Like we help each other to learn, to have better understanding, and it's double win situation.
And I don't want to compete with you. Hey, Derek, good to see you. Thanks for coming. Next in line, we have Derek, our past president of PhD Fellows. Now he is preparing for his dissertation proposal. He recently got married last fall. Congratulations. Great. Can you talk a little bit on not only on the dissertation proposal, how you're preparing it, but can you also give us some insights on balancing the work and the family life?
Yeah, absolutely. So so Sophia was talking about comps and passing comps and post slump and all that stuff. So imagine you're now in your third or fourth year, depending on whether you're in a 4 or 5 year program. You just passed comps. It's like the happiest day of your life. But then a new reality sets in. As time goes by, a few weeks go by, you're done with comps now. And the reality of this idea that you're going to have to climb this mountain, and the mountain is called the dissertation. It can be an extremely daunting task. And so I've just come up with some 9 rules for the dissertation that I'll kind of walk through, and I'll also try to shape it, add some context in terms of work-life balance in there. So you finish comps. Where do you start with the dissertation? Well, the first thing that I would do is there's quite a bit of information online on the PhD website. I think if you just you just type in Robinson College of Business, there's actually information on the dissertation, and there's also forms that you have to complete. Okay. So what you're going to want to do, read through all of that, read the university's expectation for the dissertation. It has information about the dissertation proposal, as well as information about the dissertation defense. Now, naturally, it's to some degree pretty vague. And so you're going to want to also look at that information, but also discuss the individual elements with your committee. So with that, in order to discuss something with your committee, you need a committee. So one of the first tasks, aside from reading the website, is assembling your committee. Likely, one thing that you've been doing is you've been working on projects with maybe one faculty, maybe you've worked with multiple faculty, but usually you generally have one advisor. And so typically there is an underlying expectation sometimes, or I would say most of the time, that the person that you've been working with quite a bit is going to be your dissertation chair, especially if you share the same research interests. So for example, I work with a faculty that works on servant leadership. And so naturally, it just made sense that he would be the advisor for my dissertation. It's probably going to be a little bit awkward if you've been working with somebody for the past 2-3 years, and then they've built an expectation that they're going to be your chair, and then you ended up choosing somebody else. It's not uncommon for that to happen, but you want to make sure that you're having a frequent conversation if you're going to go that route. Generally, the university requires at least 4 people to be on the committee, 3 people usually from your department, and then 1 person external. So that can be external to the department, but within the same university, so within GSU, or it could be an external person, somebody from another university. My personal sense is that you should try to pick an external committee member, somebody that is from a different university. Sometimes people will bring on like a methods person from like the math department or something. That can also be very valuable. So that's an avenue to look at. But if you can find somebody that is up and coming in the field that is outside of your university, they can add an incredible amount of value towards your dissertation. And so that's what I did. I picked somebody who is a kind of skyrocketing scholar in servant leadership, and he also does other things as well. But they can provide you with a great perspective on the current state of the literature and really help you refine your topic. Okay, so you've assembled your committee. Assemble your committee early. Make sure that you get that done. Now it's okay. I have a committee. I have maybe several ideas. Now you need to start talking to that committee. And in particular, maybe you want to develop. I caution away from developing too many ideas. Maybe go in with like 2, maybe 3 ideas that you have a theoretical model for. So model what your idea is and and do your homework going into your meetings with each of those committee members, or you could even meet as a group like I have. But you're really going to need to demonstrate that you've thought about some of these topics that you're interested in, and then you're going to need to narrow down exactly what you're going to work on. I will say that no idea is too preliminary. One of the things that I've heard people talk about over and over again is that, oh, well, I just need to develop the idea a little bit more before I present it to my faculty. Otherwise, they're going to think that I'm stupid or I haven't considered all of these things. And it's like, you're never going to be able to read everything. So I always think it's best to pitch your ideas to the faculty early on, because they can direct you into different areas to look at, or different literature, or different framing of your research topic. So meet with your committee, have a couple ideas that you're kind of you have developed a little bit, but don't develop them so much that you've taken 6 months and haven't proposed to at least discuss the ideas with your committee. Okay, so now you've talked to your committee, you've proposed a couple of ideas, they've given you directions on each of them. The next thing to do is you're going to have to decide on exactly which idea that you're going to pursue. And oftentimes that's with the advice of your committee. They're going to make it, oftentimes they'll make it pretty clear which direction you should take. And so you're going to want to decide relatively quickly. Unfortunately, I did not take this advice, and I thought about potentially doing 3 papers, and then I was like, okay, now I'm going to do 2 papers. And ultimately what I decided was that I was going to focus on one larger paper. But in the process, that took like 3 months to make that decision. And so the quicker you can make a decision on your precise research topic, the quicker that you can get into some of the writing and get more feedback from your committee, which is ultimately the end goal. You need to arrive at a decision on exactly what you're going to study, and then start the dissertation process. All right, so let's see. Yep, so decide, nothing's worse than dragging it on. The next portion, so you've decided on an idea. The next portion is do reading, do your research. You probably likely did a preliminary search of the literature to kind of get an idea of what the contribution would be. Now it's time to go back to the literature, get a more full understanding of where exactly is my contribution? Is this measurable? What variables am I likely to look at? Is there a particular theoretical perspective that can help narrow down that variable choice? And so these are the types of things that you want to start thinking about. And what I often do is I just start making models. I know Sarah does something similar. She likes to draw things out because it allows you to see the causal process. And then so you're making models, then you go back, you read a little bit more, oh, wow, there's this theory that says that I should be looking at this, and this variable. Well, I have those in my model, and I also have some other stuff. It looks like this other stuff needs to go. So you're kind of refining, you're reading a little bit more, and ultimately you get to a point where, all right, I feel like I have a pretty good model. I've read enough to be dangerous. Now I need to start getting to the writing portion. And sometimes this is where people struggle. But I can say from experience, I started out as a really bad writer. I was such a poor writer. And it's this iterative process of continuously getting better, which is gonna make you great. And there's an old adage that to get really good at something, it takes 10,000 hours of practice to become the expert at something. And writing is no different. And so my advice would be get started early. Know that everything that you're going to write is going to probably be critiqued by the faculty. They're not going to like a lot of it. Like I've gone through 4 iterations of just the introduction on my paper. You're going to receive negative feedback. They're going to like some aspects. They're going to tell you to rearrange it and totally take stuff out. So you got to be, kind of open to that. But the main point is to write often. There's a book called How to Write a Lot that outlines some strategies to be successful. One thing that I do is I set out a 4 or 5 5-hour period every day where I'm just going to write. I'm not going to take any breaks. I'm just going to, that 4 or 5 hour period, I'm going to lock in and I'm going to get all my writing done for that day in that period. So I think when you're writing and you're getting feedback, I think being consistent with your writing schedule is incredibly important. I know some people say, oh, well, I'm really busy right now. In your 4th year, you're also teaching classes and you're doing all this other stuff. During the semester, I'm not going to do any writing, but, during the break, I'm going to really crush it on all my writing goals. And, during the break, I like to relax. That's my time to relax, spend time with family. And so while you can make more progress during the breaks than you can during the semester, not doing any writing during the semester can be, I found, I've tried that strategy and it's been always problematic for me. It's so much better to just make those incremental steps throughout the semester and then really drive home during those break points. Okay, so you're writing every day. You should probably try to start a goal to write something every day when you're working on your dissertation. Otherwise, you're going to be in for a rude awakening because the deadline is going to come up quickly. Okay, so write. Another thing is frequent communication and feedback. Like I said, your advisor and your committee are going to basically tell you to rewrite everything and change a lot of stuff, but don't be hesitant to continuously seek feedback. So I know some people what will happen is they'll get that negative feedback and then they're like, I don't want to take anything to my advisor until it's like perfect. And that can be problematic because sometimes you'll get so far down a road that ultimately you shouldn't have taken. And so that can cost you weeks or even months if you don't meet with your advisor regularly, and then you go off down this tangent and they had a different idea for how you should proceed with your dissertation. And then all of that time is lost. So that frequent touch points, I think, can be really helpful. I usually meet with my advisor twice a week. For some people, that's too much. Some people like once a week and do that. But if you're going like 3 or 4 weeks without meeting with your advisor, sometimes that can also be problematic. And then when you go into your proposal, if you've been meeting with your advisor twice a week for the past 6 months or 7 months, like when you go to defend your proposal, they're going to know exactly what to expect. There's nothing worse than getting to the end of the line and like your committee's only seen like maybe a draft of it or maybe they only saw a theoretical model in the very beginning, and then you completely went in a completely different direction, and now they're just seeing this for the first time. That's when you might get a lot of shock from your advisor. So don't surprise the committee when you go to defense. And then lastly, you got to defend. You got to make sure that you set your defense date. Talk with your chair about when the best time is to defend. Come up with an action plan of the steps that you're going to take prior to that defense. Those can be really helpful. Like I have a writing goal to send a full draft of my paper 3 months before 3 months before my defense. So that way they can give me feedback. I can do another round of revision and then ultimately do the defense. So creating deadlines, setting goals, stuff like that is going to be really important. And then, at the end of the day, you really got to prioritize. There's so many distractions. Most likely you're going to be teaching classes in your 4th year. And so you can spend an indefinite amount of time refining those classes. And so you really got to set those hours, set that 4 or 5 hour time period to just sit down and write your dissertation. It's in the long run, it will be so much less stressful. Sarah, let's see. I see your comment here. Plan ahead. Committee, administration needs your proposal. Yes. Very good point. I just assumed everybody knows this, but they probably don't.
Not everybody knows that. I didn't know that when I started that. And I was like,
So
oh, we need to reschedule this.
Yeah, so you have to send, typically, now it depends on the department, but typically you're going to send your entire proposal to your committee at least 1 month before you defend the proposal. So that gives them some time to read your paper, give you feedback. Sometimes they expect you to make little changes here and there prior to the defense of your proposal. But yes, at least a month ahead is the prevailing norm. So make sure that you do that. And with all of this, on top of all of this, you have teaching responsibilities, you have your dissertation, this mountain that you have to climb. You also have your personal life, your family life. As Jeremy said, I got married this summer. I have a 11-year-old kid now. And so you have to find time to balance all of these conflicting priorities. And at the end of the day, they are conflicting priorities. The more time that I spend with my family, the less time I'm spending with my dissertation. The more time I spend with my dissertation, the less time I'm spending with my family. So it's very difficult to just strike that balance. It really is. But I think one of the things that's really important is communicate those priorities with your family, with your significant other, so that way they have an expectation and they understand that, hey, I'm not going to be available during these times to go play baseball or coach your team, whatever it might be. Like, for example, during my second year, I think, I coached my son's baseball team. That is not an option, this year. Previously, as you all know, I was in the PhD Fellows executive team. That's just not an option this year, So it's your priorities to some degree shift, and you do have to make sacrifices. At the end of the day, you got to make sacrifices, but communicating those times, your priorities to your family is really important. So that way they understand where you're coming from. And those are my 10 rules for life.
Great, thank you so much. I it was just only a few weeks ago that I realized that my family was kind of in the dark when it comes to my schedule. I thought my schedule was pretty open and straightforward, but it turns out when they were expecting, they were asking me to do things when I'm extremely busy, and I got free time, and they weren't expecting me to be free, so they had some other arrangements. So yes, communication. I totally agree with that. I wish I had heard about that, or it feels obvious, but it's actually not. It didn't occur to me, and I fully agree with that. While I do have some more questions about the overall process, I think I'm
I
going
just
to
have
move
one
on.
question. One
Oh,
question
sure.
about the timing. So Derek, when did you start your dissertation process? And when you get meeting, like, do you meet with your other member of faculty as well before the proposal?
Yeah, so I haven't proposed yet. So I'm proposing at the end of the semester. I started early summer of my third year, but I'm in a 5-year program. So if you're in a 4-year program, early summer of your third year is probably, or even before. I mean, you don't have to. My third year, I was working on other projects. And so that took my entire third year I sent 2 papers out to a journal for submission. And so my entire third year was not spent on dissertation. That was spent on getting papers out to journals. But if you're in a 4-year program, probably right after your second year. So summer of the second year going into that third year is when I assembled my committee.
I'd like to say though, I don't know about you, Derek, but for me, it wasn't like now I'm starting my dissertation process. Like it's been ongoing, right? Like you're sort of working on it the whole time you're in the program. It's just, it's a little clearer, or you're a little more focused, or it starts to come into light. Sorry, I don't mean to jump in here, but I personally feel more prepared for my proposal now after I've done it than I did when I did it. And so, part of that was, the disruption of the pandemic and everything. And part of that was, I wasn't talking with my advisors as much because of all of that. And so I wasn't as solid sort of in my direction of things until like after I proposed, which is, I wouldn't recommend that, but that's, I would encourage everybody to not feel too, I don't know, too rigid in their thinking of, oh, if you haven't started, then you're totally screwed. Like, don't don't think of it like that, because it's fluid and it can be variable for different people, and so don't stress too much about that.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, as for how does presentation for proposals, how actually you defend that, how it unfold. Patric, can you share on your insights how, from your experience? Patric is fifth year in RMI department, and he recently defended his dissertation. Congrats.
Zhang, honestly, I actually defended my proposal
Oh, okay.
a while ago, and at this time actually on the job market. So I basically wrote a few points about my past 5 years, everything about what I did, and I guess that some of these points might be very useful.
Great, thank you.
Things for some of the PhD students here at RCB. So if you just look at any curriculum vitae or the CV of any university professors, say in those public schools or state universities, you'll realize that their CV will focus on 3 points: the research, the teaching, and the service. Now, since we're the PhD students and since the PhD program is designed to train us to become future scholars, we don't really need to focus on service at this time, I guess. It probably would be for the full professor to worry about that. So I would say for the PhD students, we need to work on 3 things: the research, the teaching, and the coursework. And that is why in our first year at the RMI department, just to let you know, it's the risk management and the insurance department. Our entire first year is focused on taking the classes. And we actually have a comprehensive exam by the end of the first year. And so back at that time, our PhD director would just tell us to worry about the coursework first year, because we actually got 6 and I think all of those 6 classes, they are theoretical classes, so it's kind of overwhelming. But I think the first year is also an opportunity for us to talk to the people around, maybe talking to some of the professors here in our department, because right after the end of the first year, right after the comprehensive exam, we need to start building our research portfolio. So it will be a great time. Will be a great opportunity for us to start reaching out to the researchers in our department and see if we can find any potential advisors at that time. Now, by the start of the second year, we have already passed our comprehensive exam. I think it's time to formally start building the research portfolio. Usually, I think it's a good idea to concentrate on a research topic and try to dig deeper into this topic, as opposed to look around and see whatever data I can get, and then try to write a paper on the first data set I can find, and then try to write another paper on some other evidences I have found. That's probably not as good as digging deeper into a single research topic. And I think that these days, the hiring people of those universities, they care about if we are able to look deeper into research topics. And I think that if you try to write a few papers focusing on a single research topic, that's a really good sign, and that sends a really good signal to those hiring people because they believe that you have your independent research capabilities. And that's really good evidence. And speaking of the theory versus the empirical research, so since my research is more focused on theoretical ones, I think it's just up to your preference, right? It's also up to your choice whether you want to go theory or you want to go empirical. But if I were to give you some if I were to tell you some differences between these two, I would say that the theoretical research would usually require you to spend more time to start with. Usually you need to invest more time learning the methodology, and you need to sometimes you need to practice a lot to get the skills used to develop new theory. For the empirical research, it usually seems like it's easier to start with. Now that you have a data set that's cleaned up, you can definitely run some regressions based on, some of the theory that you have already seen in the literature, and then you can just run some regressions, test if those theory is correct or not, right? So, however, for the empirical research, it usually takes a longer time to finalize your paper and to go through the R&R process, right? Because usually those R&R people, they would ask you a lot of questions. Why do you run this regression? Why do you have this specification? And they got tons of questions. So usually it would take much longer to go through the R&R process and to eventually get your paper published. So I'm not saying empirical research is easier. It sometimes can be the opposite, right? It sometimes would require you to attend to a lot of details and to make your regressions and your results really polished. So so this is this is something that really distinguishes the theoretical research from empirical ones. Okay, and so starting the second year, we actually finished our required 6 theoretical classes by the end of the first year. And starting the second year, we have a lot of options when it comes to the classes that we register for. So I'm not sure if my advice is correct for all of you, but I think that when it comes to optional classes, I would recommend you to take the classes that's more related to your research track, rather than taking some random classes, some random methodology ones. But this is just my own opinion, because I think I would rather read some literature than taking the classes that's not really related to my research topics. So that's my advice. Now, let me just talk a little bit about my third year. So by the third year, I'm not sure if you, I think most of you guys would have attended some conferences, some professional conferences, like conferences hosted by your professional association. Like for us, since we are risk management students, we have our ARIA, which is the American Risk and Insurance Association. They have their annual conferences. And some of my research is more focused on actual science. So we have actual science conferences hosted by the SOA. So whatever it is, I think it's really good idea to attend some of those conferences in your third year. One of the reason is it will help you to understand the latest developments in your field. Like in my third year, I was actually working on a really theoretical paper, and I find it a little bit hard to write some of those introduction and intuition to explain why we are doing this research question. And then I went to those actual science conference and listened to the, so I think one of the good benefit is if you submit a paper to those conferences, and if you volunteer to review someone else's paper, then I think those conference organizers will try to find a match. What I mean I think a match is that they try to find someone who has similar research interests with you. They will probably assign you to review the guy who shares your research interests, right? To review that guy's paper. And they will probably also assign another guy who's sharing your research interests to review your paper and to give advices to you, right? So this is going to be very helpful for you to polish your paper, to write a good and excellent introduction, but also to make your understand what's the latest developments in your field. So I actually borrowed a lot of ideas from my experience in those in one of those conferences, and it really helped me a lot to write my dissertation. And so it's also worth mentioning that you can find some potential research collaborators if you talk to people in those conferences. I mean, you don't have to push yourself, because some of those, as far as I know, some of the people who they just show up those conferences and they don't really prefer to talk about serious business. But some of the people, they are quite open to finding research collaborators. So if that's the case, and you happen to talk to those people, then I think that you will probably find a lot of new opportunities, and that's going to be awesome. Now, let me just talk a little bit about my fourth year. I think during my fourth year, I was actually still working on my dissertation paper, and it's also I think it's also worth mentioning that you can submit your paper to academic journals. Now, one of the good things that I learned from those reviewers is that any paper that you submit to those journals, your paper better be well written. Those reviewers, they don't want to read any paper that has got a grammar mistakes. You know, it gives them an impression that your paper is not well written. And if you don't write your paper well, then how do you expect people to review your paper, right? How do you expect people to dedicate a lot of time to review your paper thoroughly? So that's a big problem. And after the reviewers read their paper, well, sometimes it could take a lot of time for those reviewers to read your paper, and they might not even give you any feedbacks for quite a long time. So if that happens, I mean, you could be you could try to contact them and see, you know, just try to send an email and, you know, politely ask them if you have ignored or forgot about my paper. So that's kind of a reminder that helps, right? To remind them to look at your paper and give you some suggestions. And they would sometimes give you some of the suggestions that don't seem professional at first sight. Like sometimes they're not really an expert in your field, right? Especially for me, since I'm working on theoretical paper, sometimes they might be asking me some of the really basic econometric question that you didn't anticipate. So that's completely normal. And it is your obligation to explain clearly to them, even though you think some of their questions is really basic, right? To address their concerns. That's what I think is really helpful, because it is up to them to decide if your paper will be accepted. So it is your obligation to address them. And I would copy and paste each one of those questions on my LaTeX, and then I set up a new paragraph to address their concerns, and then I copy paste their next question, and then just another paragraph to answer their second question. It's just like that. Okay, and I think during the fourth year, it's also helpful to practice your presentation skills. And I remember that we had those seminars in the accounting and finance departments that would require PhD students to present at least, let's say, 5 times a semester, probably even more. At first sight, I thought this is some kind of crazy. But then I begin to realize that this is a really good opportunity for us to practice presentation skills. And that's going to be helpful eventually, because eventually when you become a scholar, you need to teach classes, you need to attend those professional conferences, and you need to present. We also need to present during those interviews, job interviews. So that is why practicing the presentation skills in the 4th year can pay off. And speaking of the teaching, I find that Dr. Satish's class, and I assume all of you will be taking or have already taken his class, and I find his class quite useful. And what he said about the clarity, organization, and the grading to be quite accurate. And if you pay attention to these points, then it's very likely that you will get high grades of the for the when it comes to the student evaluation of the instructor. And I also need to remind you that some of the students, they might go to a teaching school after the PhD program. And in fact, I knew a student in my major, the risk management major, but in another school. And she's been teaching like voluntarily in another school, probably the Columbia in the New York City. And she's been teaching a course that's not even related to her program, which is the risk management program, during the entire 4th year. And eventually she got a really nice job offer at a liberal arts college, thanks to her teaching experiences in the 4th year. So a lot of PhD students and faculty members, they might say, well, the university doesn't really reward us with teaching, right? The university nowadays is like rewarding us with almost everything except for teaching. However, some of the students, they practice their teaching, eventually got a really good job offer at those liberal arts college. So that's really interesting thing to know. And I think that one of my, I think there are 2 more points when it comes to teaching. So my first point is that you try to put, it's always a good idea to try to push students hard during the semester, rather than pushing them at the end of the semester. You know, when you try to push them at the end of the semester, when the final exam looms, you know, you're just adding a lot of pressure to them. And if you don't put a lot of pressure on them during the first 3 months, then they don't have enough skill. They probably wouldn't have enough skills to be adapted during exam. So why do you push them so hard by the end of the semester? It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I think that it's always good to push them hard during the first 3 months of the semester, so that they will practice hard and try to gain those skills that you require for them to successfully complete your class, right? And that's, in my opinion, that's turns out to be better than pushing them hard in the last month of the semester. And so that's one of my points. And another point is that, let me say, so I always try to help my students. So this statement might be a little bit, it's just a little bit tricky, but to be honest with you, when you have, when you keep this in mind, when you keep helping the students, this notion in your mind, then you're really going to help them a lot, and you're gonna answer their questions, address their concerns, and students can actually tell that. Okay, if you compare 2 instructors, one of the instructors just, you know, let the students pass the exam and give them really good grades, no matter if they put efforts towards your class. And let's say this is the first instructor, and we have another instructor who is being responsible and who is willing to help the students, who also push the students during the semester, right? The students can actually tell that. They don't just want an instructor that gives them good grades and try to be a good man, okay? They want an instructor who can actually challenge them and teach them to learn something. So these are the two points that I have learned during my teaching experience, and I think these 2 points contribute to your to the evaluation of the instructor report that you are going to receive after you teach the class. So now by the 5th year, we're supposed to go to the job market, and I think that I'm not sure if this applies to all your majors, but I think at least for finance major and for the accounting major, we need to have a job market paper, and we need to prepare for the presentation of that job market paper. Usually, the presentation of the JMP could take an hour, but could be 30 minutes if you are presenting to some hiring people outside US. But in the US, I think usually it would be 60 minutes. And I think that it's helpful to set up some mock job interviews. You can probably send an email to your advisor, and your advisor can invite some other committee members and some other professors who also do research in your field, and they can give you advices. And you could just use their suggestions to improve and polish your paper further. So pretty much that's what I have at this time. I actually have one more point, but that, yeah, I actually have one more point, but that seems really awkward at this time because I actually wrote apply for research grants. So that's actually what we need to do when we get a job. And I think there are actually some students who applied for research grants before they went to the job market. And this might help a little bit, but I think this is not always the case for business school PhD students. So pretty much that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you
That
so
was a
much.
great
That's very
wrap up. And yeah, I recently helped a friend for a mock interview, and it turns out there's the school that he's applying is looking for those who had experience or anticipating getting grants or external funds. So I think that is very relevant. In one of your points, the one that I was interested was in using the conference as idea generation or policing the idea. I'm still in doing the baby steps and participating in the conferences. But how other other than presenting the conference paper and getting the feedbacks, what are the other ways that we can do in getting the ideas or getting if my idea is works in the field, or how can I polish those ideas and get more ideas in conferences?
Zhengming, so my response might not be it might not be a direct response to your question, but I think that taking advantage of the conferences and the resources that it gives to you is going to be really helpful. And you don't have to be to have a perfect paper to present in one of those conferences. And in fact, if you don't have a paper ready, you can actually volunteer to review someone else's paper, right? I think you can actually talk to the organization of the conference and tell them what your research interests are, so that they can find a better match for you. I don't want them to find a paper that's not even related to your research interests for you, because that's going to be a waste of time, and it will also be a panic for you to read some paper that you don't understand. But I want you to review some paper that's related to your research interests, right? And that is so much better. And those people, let's say if the presenter of that paper is a more senior faculty member in one of those research schools, then I think there's good chance that you can further keep in touch with him or her, and even after the conference, and you can try to learn some of the latest developments of your research field, right? And that connection is going to help you a lot because it's going to save you a lot of time browsing through hundreds of literature in your field, right? It's going to save you a lot of time. That's in my opinion. And say if you do have some draft of your paper, it doesn't have to be 100% perfect, right? I think the minimum would be to have a research question and the major results. The major results could come in the form of figures, like some charts or some tables, right? The table summarizing the regression results, or it could be something else, like if you actually prove the theorem, right? So as long as you have your research questions and some of the major results, I think you should be already ready to get your paper sent to those conference organizers. And just to let you know, they even have, these days, most of the conferences, I think they have the PhD sessions. What that means is the PhD students, they present their paper in the afternoon of one day. And at that time, you will find a lot of peers in your program, but also they said the standard of the standard for accepting a paper will be lower than the standard of accepting a paper from a full-time professor, right? And that makes a lot of sense. So you don't have to make your research 100% perfect to attend those conferences. So you could either try reviewing someone else's paper, or you could present your paper probably in a PhD PhD poster session, right? So so I think that these are really good resources for you. And another good resource would be definitely your advisor, because your advisor is probably the guy who has looked into the research topic for a much longer time than you, right? Because of their experiences, and so talking to them is going to help you a lot, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I remember I talked to Sarah about this, to frequently speed up the submission to conference to get more feedback. Just do not hesitate. So
I just put in the chat also, the worst that can happen is they reject you, which is the same position as if you didn't submit anything at all. So you might as well submit because there's nothing bad that happens. It's, right. It's not, you don't get blackballed from some list or anything like that. It's a conference. It's the standards of quality and the expectations are really very different from if you're submitting to a top journal. And, I don't know about you guys, but I've reviewed for many conferences, and the quality is much lower than publications. And so it's not only does that help you to see what people are submitting, like Patrick said, and you see the sort of range of things that are coming in, especially in your area, that will save you time on lit reviews and things. But then you can also see, these papers, my writing is decent and about on par with this, so I might as well submit. It helps to give you some confidence that it's not so overwhelming, it's not so daunting, it's not so intimidating, like I could do this too. I'm writing this way too, so you might as well submit. Again, the worst they can do is say no, so you might as well do it.
Mm-hmm.
Great points.
Right, it's actually the practice that helps you. So don't worry about being rejected from those conferences. It's not going to be the end of the world because you don't lose anything from being rejected, right? And the first time I actually presented in one of those PhD symposiums, I was absolutely scared. And I didn't make a lot of points clear when I presented my paper. But by the second year, so I attended that symposium 2 years in a row, and the second time I presented in the symposium, I personally think that I made a lot of improvements, and according to some of the feedbacks from the people who reviewed my paper, they actually said that, wow, this time you're doing much better. I mean, so I think the practice helps a lot, right?
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for giving us such comprehensive thoughts over your journey in 5 years. I'm thinking, just as I mentioned at the beginning, there may be some like first, second year student will not be able to attend and ask questions lively. I'm not sure whether the speakers are open to share your emails. That in case they have questions, they can send emails to you to ask as well. Would that be all right?
Yeah, I think that's totally fine. You can actually include your contact information on the last slide of your presentation and tell them, since we don't have a lot of time today, right? Because usually on a conference day, you would have at least, let's say, at least 6 or even 10 presentations on a single day, right? So we don't have a lot of time for each presentation, and it's totally fine that you leave your contact information and tell people, just reach out to me and we can have a conversation. And sometimes during the conference day, you would have those dinners or lunches together. It's like a professional lunch. And during that time, you can also talk to the people who share research interests with you. And sometimes they might introduce their PhD student to you or have some other side conversation. So that's that happens a lot, actually. So yeah, I mean, having the connection is always a good thing.
Yeah, I think Baha also left his email in the chat box. And Derek, I suppose that's also fine.
If you all want to just put it in the chat, because since we're recording this, I'll also include the chat for people to look back on if they're wanting to see any of these links and resources and contact you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just for the interest of time, so sorry for the this meeting overrunning the original schedule, but the official event, I think we can say it's over. But feel free to stay and just chat with us together. And if we have more questions, we can proceed. But I think we can say the actual event is adjourned.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for organizing.
To see folks.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you.
I learned a lot. I made a lot of notes today.
Me too. I
Yes.
made a lot of notes.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you all.